The Honorable Deputy Minister Banda, PS Prof. Tagwira, let me ride on all protocols and get moving. My task is very easy because they are you saying I'm shorter than the PS? Okay, I accept. Perfect. My task is actually quite easy because I'm just trying to put a bit of structure to how the next 1.5 days are going to go, what are our key objectives. But if all fails, the statement by the PS and the Deputy Minister is really what guides us in achieving these. So if nothing is clear, we go back. Especially both emphasized a call to action so that we leave this place with some agreements, some clear follow-up actions. Next slide, please. So, I think you all received from the ministry the rural industrialization work. Once again, it's not the Bible, because the Bible is always correct, even if it is 2,000 years out of date, it's always correct. But this is one that we can take as a work in progress, so that we can sharpen the actual working modalities. So that's one aspect. I think the rest of this morning, we are showcasing what the institutions of higher and tertiary education have already put on the ground, things that are happening. So from the day His Excellency declared heritage-based education 5.0, rural industrialization has been happening as an outcome of the educational system. So that really is something we have to listen to. As many of the activities happening on the ground, so that we pull lessons from there together. We will need to look for what's working, what are the general models we are likely to use across the board. More importantly, the call to action only happens when we regroup. Both the PS and the Deputy Minister said something to the following effect. Industrialization is not just a mechanical process. It is actually a social transformation process. A lot of you remember if somebody said to you, oh, this one is industrious. Being industrious is not that you are using a machine. Being industrious means you are using your brain to be more productive. Industrialization is a social process of transforming all our institutions, from the individual to the family to the community. We reorganize for the purposes of increasing production, increasing productivity, reducing costs of production, being more efficient, and therefore making it possible to manufacture and distribute products. So it is important that social innovation is just as important as technological innovation. Those partnerships across academia, government, private sector, crafting new ways of working together in the rural space is in itself half the challenge. So we should discuss when we present each institution, please highlight who you are partnering with and how you are likely to improve the structure of those partnerships to now deliver this high level, now national policy and strategy, which this ministry has really done a wonderful job to put together. Next slide. We've also heard something to the following effect. This agenda won't go forward without increased investment in these rural areas. those investments to come to these rural areas is not going to happen on the same basis that we've been moving along now. It is to be new creative ways of figuring out how investments are going to come into these rural areas. So these investments are right across the board, like we say, social, economic, and environmental assets to be created for the purposes of rural industrialization. And it is important to envision, when we say investment and when we say technology, skills necessary to industrialize the entire economy. When we say those things, already a lot of what the institutions have been working on now have to come together and packaged more effectively. Whether it is energy, how to get the digital capacity in the rural areas, how to bring those skills there, water and so on. So, lastly, we have to foster a much more African approach to rural industrialization and debunk, decenter the Western narrative of industrialization, because it does not fit our situation because of these dual economies, if you understand. So let's modernize, not westernize, because we're in the habit of confusing westernization with modernization. We're upgrading our own systems so that we not only match the global standard, will exceed them. Because Africa is going to be the next economic superpower after China. China has already taken over from the United States. China in the next 15 to 20 years will also be in the same space that the United States is in now. They'll be so wealthy, they won't be as competitive as we are. So even at 6% growth rates for the next 20 years, we'll be the largest economy. We will be a superpower. Those of you who are going to be around, I plan to be around for at least another. Any other slide? Yes. So tomorrow is the main day for. We're not saying do brand new things. We're just saying just solidify and create more effective clusters. Form around whatever it is, form around a specific industry, form around a specific area, so that you can deliver this wonderful program. All this. So I think that what matters most is the last slide, I think. And this is a fact. The PS mentioned it, the minister mentioned it. The dual economy is the problem. Every one of the 55 African countries is a dual economy. And that is the primary reason why we don't fully industrialize. It's not corruption, maladministration, all the other stuff. All that's important stuff. But the high level thing is, as long as you've got a dual economy, you are not going any place, because you will never ever connect the majority of the disconnected to the disconnected. So that is what matters for us to solve. And at the end of it all, advances in heritage-based education 5.0 is what has brought us here, and why this ministry and your partners, this idea we've had it from our principles, will be a key driver of Vision 2030. And Professor Jimbo, you have heard the PS. I didn't say it about Zimche. You heard it from the PS and the minister. Hey, Zimche is not just there to be a watchdog over the universities. We have to help to pull together these ideas and make sure they're in the curriculum. We should effectively validate that the curriculum, simply, the curriculum and how you're applying it is really transforming the situation on the ground. So I think you'll be hearing more from Prof. in that regard. thank you so much. And the program you have, it will be adjusted as we go to fit the agenda. So all the very best with the 1.5 days. Thank you so much.
If you go to a village, and I have been to many, what are the challenges that you immediately see? You immediately see in a village, there is no electricity and there is no water. So the women, they have to fetch water, they have to fetch wood. So it is all about energy and it's about water. If you solve the issue of energy, then you solve the problem of water, because you would dig a well and get your water. If you have electricity, then everyone will work. So the example that I'm going to give is a practical example that is implemented in Madagascar and it's implemented in Zambia. Now there is a bit of difference, and I'm very hopeful here because it is being implemented there, but they don't have what you have. The rural industrialization accepted by government and taken by government, they don't have that. So it becomes difficult of scaling up. Now, I will take you through those examples. So this is part of the skilling academies that I'm leading to have it in this continent. And in fact, you can see most of the things that we have been discussing are included. Now, what is the difference between this type of approach and the usual job creation and so on? Is on this, what we do is first we identify the job, what is needed with the industry, and then you develop the academy. Then you develop the certificate. So everyone who goes through these courses, they will be certified at the end of it. And one of the countries that we are going to be working is here in Zimbabwe. So I say a scalable model, industrial, how it can support. So you have to support the skills development, you have to provide the energy. So if you have those two, then your village will never go hungry. So this is essentially for the energy. What I'm saying here is solar powered energy community hub. So in those villages, and I have seen from the number of presentations, we did not talk about the energy. Because if you go to a village and you talk about digitalization, you talk about telephone, you talk about most of those things, you cannot do them if you don't have that energy. If you don't have that water, you can't do this. So this is how we do it. So it addresses the energy poverty, it limits unemployment, empowers youth, and transforms rural areas. So if I go to the example, so the example I give you is from Zambia. There are 10 villages that this has been implemented. So here it is, the model we call it Sun Square model. It is developed by private company, so it's a private company. It is a public-private partnership. And in that, you can see the buildings. It comes in a container, and it is a 25 kilowatt system. And out of that, then we have done all those 7 elements that I showed. And for example, if you see here, this is about water. So simply you have your water, and then you have drinking water for your families. You have drinking water. You have hydroponics. There are many things that people have developed once they have that energy. So this is on water. Next is on health. So in those small rooms, you actually have a clinic. You can have your vaccines. Basically, once you have that energy, you can do a number of things. Now, all this, what I'm showing here, is done in one village, in one hub. So each hub can have a similar one, so you really start transforming. This is about, you can see there are a number of innovations that young people are doing there when they come. When they see a hairdresser or you name it, those young people around there, they know what, once they see electricity, once they have water, once they have space, then you have transformation happening. And they may not even need you. So this is creating different innovation activities. Here is the weather presentation on telecommunication. Now, with the telecommunication in far places, their problem for having a tower is actual electricity. So when you put this, we actually sold electricity to the telecommunication people, so they can put their mast. And with that mast, then the community actually got their electricity, their coverage. So it is a partnership that actually we did not think about it at the beginning, but because we went very far where there is no coverage, and for the telecom it was not easy, they did not have a presence, so we created a partnership. Here we also created a community environment. So the young people, they come and watch football, they can have their meetings, you name it. So that community has become now, that center with that energy, with that light, transforms the community. Now this is, we were talking about agricultural processing. Now, when you are talking about rural industrialization, it has scales. When you go deep into the village, you need energy to be there with them, so that they can also start processing. Now on this, you can see the number of, there is a ground nut grinder, oil experiment, there are a number of things, and once we start implementing this, there are many, many more that are happening and being added. Now, we also created a digital education room. So from the schools around, they would come for the digital education type. And so you can say, we provide them with tablets, rack tablets, and we provide them part of, when you have the water, we also ensure that you have internet. So that when you have internet, when you have water, you have energy, then you have transformation happening. Now, all this is fine, but how do you finance it? Because this kind of activities, we should not expect grants. We should not expect government taxpayers' money. This is wealth we have in the village. I was telling Professor Mandi, and I have spent a bit of time now in UAE. In UAE, they sell you a plan on sand. There's nothing else. There's sand, and on that sand, they tell you they have a plan. And you go and buy an apartment on that sand that has not been built. Now, this is because they know how to sell. They have nothing, but they are selling. Here, the land you have, how can I have gold in my mind and I go to a bank to borrow? No, there is something that we need to change. So the financing part is where we need to look at how do we make sure we are not looking for grants, but financing, proper financing, so that it becomes sustainable and we create wealth. And there are many ways. The energy part, for example, we are talking about how can we claim carbon credit, because we are doing things that has not been done. So there are many mechanisms that we are looking, and as we move forward, we will discuss, and I will be very happy to also partner. I will be also happy to look at how my presence with the UAE, especially on the skills development side, how can we make Zimbabwe one of those countries that leads, because you are leading with the rural industrial, and there is no other country that have done this. So it's mature. The product is mature now. how do we scale it up, and then how do we take it also to other countries. Now here, obviously it is important to develop partnerships, and this, the digital school and the global skilled academies, we would be very happy to work with you so that we support you with the certification and whatever is needed. And then of course, the private sector is a critical element on this. Now I put this, but I don't think this is needed because you have already some good solid plans on what you are going to do next. Now, I think this is the last slide, and essentially what we need to do is, listening to the commitments, listening to what is happening here. I think we should not waste time. We should move forward and create the necessary partnerships and ensure that we have the right financing models. Because if we don't finance, we don't get the right financing mechanisms, if we are waiting for government to collect tax, because the rural area should be the one that brings money, because we have resources there. And therefore, let's work together to find good resources. And thank you very much for listening to me. And this has been a great opportunity. I'm the only foreigner here, but I don't feel I'm a foreigner here. It is home for me as well. Thank you.
So I'll avoid, because I'm used to preaching to people who are not converted. But now I'll be preaching to the converted. So I will speed up a lot of what I'm saying, but let me remind you that yesterday we achieved a lot. There was a lot of sharing our experiences, especially on existing programs and projects. We learned a lot about the innovations, the technological progress that's being made in the rural space, including some institutional innovations as well. We were sharing a lot about how we are already connecting or engaging with the communities. I think the PS mentioned that adopted community is now official policy of the ministry, and I'm sure if everybody had got a chance to talk, you would have explained more about your progress towards that. But the thing that we're probably now taking to the next level is the partnership we discussed yesterday. So it is now also clear, and from the opening statements of the principals yesterday and the comments, I think towards the end of the day yesterday, it's also clear that what the higher tertiary education institutions are doing is increasingly really aligned with the contribution that your sector is making to Vision 2030. And I think what was also coming through strongly is that the progress made so far by your sector is having a visible and acknowledged impact by the whole of government in terms of driving towards a knowledge and innovation-driven society, which is what yesterday our principals were hammering on. So I would say that so this is me just putting interpretation. Nothing of what I'm saying is policy, your principles give you that. So it's my kind of interpretation of what I'm hearing and where we're going. Definitely transitioning to an upper middle income economy, but built on more connected rural urban foundations and more inclusive growth. That dual economy has to be diluted or eliminated to ensure that all Zimbabweans will participate meaningfully in development. Modernizing through heritage-based industrialization, using more of our local resources, our local knowledge. So the roles of higher tertiary education institutions, and I added here local authorities because that's where the communities are. So we have to recast our curriculum as well as our andragogy so that we are increasingly impacting the knowledge and skill that transforms our villages. Identify those value chains in the different regions of Zimbabwe where we now know how to push comparative advantage for those regions and engage with our local authorities and government in planning for these investments. Our communities have to negotiate. I'll talk a little bit about political economy skills, which is one skill they never taught us, the colonials. We have to teach ourselves. The Asian tigers have figured out political economy. But our rural communities have no choice. They have to negotiate with those local authorities and government if we are going to bring more utilities and infrastructure in our areas. And we have a role to play in arming our rural communities to engage with anyone, business, government, local authorities, professors. They have to have that skill. And yesterday we ended the day starting to form a picture of what kind of community hubs that might be. And today in your group work, when we get there, you're going to crystallize that further. So when PS was talking about NDS2, and I know in the group that I work with at the ministry, at some point we were throwing around some of the things we're seeing as your kind of RPM type strategic outcomes, like diluting the dual economy, mass integration of small, medium enterprises and rural farmers into the industrial commercial space, and sustainable heritage and ecological stewardship, which I'm going to talk a bit more later on. And those are examples of some of the key indicators. I won't bore you with that. And definitely the ministry continues to push this Agenda 2030 with clear articulation of all these things. For instance, for the higher and tertiary institutions, we really have to put our focus on transforming the curriculum even more. I know it's happening, but I also know that a lot of the transformation of the curriculum is more to do with just trying to make a bit more money than really getting to the heart of this great work that's happening. For instance, the most popular program across all the universities is that, what do you call it? Social work. It is. You know, it's the most popular program across all the universities. But none of our universities really has fantastic understanding of what's happening to our own social systems. The family systems are crumbling, the community systems are crumbling. But the social work program is popular because it's suited for industrial society in England and Europe, so the people graduate so that they can go and scratch the backs of those old people, not to straighten out our own social capital. So there's all that kind of stuff. And I'm also saying that the blue washing industries is where the ministry, what the ministry has done, what you were seeing since yesterday is blue washing industries, some of those. This is where our communities are not going to compete with anyone. They are going into new space where they are going to create new markets. So I think we're going to end up just saying we want both the old markets and the new markets. We want everything. Let's not give them a chance. So I think I've said enough about what the ministry has already been telling us. And that's last slide there is something that when I was going out with the team in the ministry at the universities, I kept saying, and it's something I was arguing with colleagues at Great Zimbabwe University, but because I'm chairman there for a few more months anyway, you can't, as chairman, you can't argue with the vice chancellors. They will fire you. You smile. Okay, they may not fire the chairman, but definitely the vice chancellor runs the place, isn't it? So you have to advise softly And I keep saying, it's not only GZU, because now even at Zimche, and CEO will tell us, there's a lot of emphasis on the in-out strategy for engagement rather than the out-in. So I'm pushing here the idea that the in-out was the right place to start with the innovation hubs. What you are innovating, how do we take it out to the community, to society? But now, with the rural industrialization, it has to be more of an out-in. You have to go out there and figure out what they're doing and bring it back into the institutions. That's all that is trying to say. So, so one last thing on that is to say, I like the way the Asian tigers did it, for reasons that I will explain a bit later, but they're the only, Asian tigers and dragons are the only countries in the world who have figured out how to obliterate the dual economy. No African country has figured it out. Zimbabwe will be the first one, because you are already doing this, and Zimbabwe will be the first fully industrialized African country because of the path that we have taken here. But the Chinese, when 1980, they changed their approach and said, let's push agriculture at village level, increase production, productivity, diversify the production base. At the same time, they declared village and township manufacturing. And PS, this is what I'm proposing, that our higher and tertiary education institutions, they have to go even further and say it's not just rural industrialization. You want to see an increase in agricultural production, because there's no industrial revolution without an agricultural revolution first. You need to have an increase in the raw material base and lower the production cost. So, universities, institutions declare that you're going to see manufacturing in the village and township before you even get to the growth center. That's how the Chinese finally did it. And provide some vivid description of what you're going to provide your sector. So I'm saying this piece because I'm thinking, even as we go to the annual strategic planning sessions in our universities and institutions, this should be more ingrained in those programs. So, and then some kind of indicators that would get onto that. I will give you a summary of the whole presentation so that even if I don't finish it, I'll have said it. Start off with the dual economy is the enemy. I always start there. Dual economy is the problem. It creates a middle income trap, which we'll discuss then. So, the change theory is we do things that obliterate the dual economy, integrate the mass of people disconnected to the rest of the industrial manufacturing processes. And that happens through massification, which some of you were talking about yesterday, industrial upgrading. All the Asian tigers and dragons, they upgraded their industries. They didn't say informal sector. It doesn't matter what it is, it can be as informal as you want. They upgrade that instead of thinking you can substitute. Industrial integration, you consciously integrate those who are disconnected into the growing part of the economy. Dual circulation strategies, meaning as you don't just say export, because export is just because you are drunk with the US dollar. You are exporting because you don't have your own products, and so you want US dollar to buy things that you are not producing. No, dual circulation says first push your domestic market, and as you're pushing the domestic markets, you then leverage for export. That's how the Asian tigers did it. Instead of just saying export alone, technological drive. Okay, so that's the change theory. The real heart of that change theory is creating a rural middle class, which I'll talk about in a little bit. The third thing is already what I've been hammering. That is what obliterates the structural fault in the economy. Number 4 is managing structural transformation from an unorthodox to an orthodox structural transformation. An orthodox structural transformation is where you urbanize. People are going to urban areas, but there's no industry, there's no manufacturing. That's unorthodox. Orthodox structural transformation is when people migrate from rural agrarian to urban industrial because of manufacturing. Okay, so as I said earlier, that will also require some political economy management. The policy innovations are just the framework that the ministry uses, because all of these require innovation. So when we say innovation in your sector, it's not just the inventions you are making in your innovation apps. You need innovations everywhere. In the legislation, in the institutional modalities, in the infrastructural provisions, the entire shebang. Innovation is everywhere. And then I've got the two lessons from you, and I don't have many, because your higher and tertiary education institutions when it comes to Japanese and Chinese models. So that's the summary. So when I'm stopped, you can. So I already explained. The urbanization with manufacturing is how England was the first fully industrialized country. The whole of Europe took that model, became fully industrialized. Europe became the most powerful region in the world, with England as the superpower for a long time. That's why they were able to colonize us. That's why they were able to colonize North America. It was the same model. Canada, United States, Australia, New Zealand, it's the same model they took from Europe. So that was the first round of industrialization. You must read your history, colleagues, friends. Don't be fooled that industrialization is a science. It is a total social science. You have to understand how the other countries did it. You have to understand the whole process of that transformation. This is how the Europeans did it. And were able to colonize the rest of the world, including us. Okay. And there was never another fully industrialized nation again until Second World War, and the rest of the world were now fighting for freedom. Remember, it was not until then that Japan became the first non-European country to figure out how to also be fully industrialized. You have to learn how they did it, and how the rest of the Asian dragons and tigers learned from Japan. That's all that happened. South Korea, Singapore, Taiwan, Malaysia, China today, they all learned and improved, continually improved on the Japanese model. We'll come back to that later. So we are in an orthodox structural transformation where we're urbanizing with our jobs. Then you call it a city, and the Minister of Local Government keeps upgrading every little township into a town. It's not a town if you're not manufacturing. So the dual economy is because of mass exclusion of a lot of people from manufacturing and industrial processes. There's always low economic growth. You don't grow beyond 3%, 4%. Doesn't matter who you are. Even South Africa, for the last 30 years, has been growing at average 1%. And we're saying it's not a bad upper middle income. They won't go beyond. They're going backwards now, as you know. So it is that the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, unemployment continues to go up. That is what causes the political problems. Okay. I know there are other reasons why we have political challenges, but as long as you're in the dual economy, you're always going to have. You can change your president every 2 years. You can do elections every day. You are still going to be poor. Okay. Until you change the hardwired structure of that economy. Okay. Then you can also elect anyone else. It doesn't matter. They are also electing buffoons. They're not Trump. They are not real. But they are running the economy. That's all you need. Okay. It's not a temporary challenge. It's a permanent one. So, let me go. I've already touched on the change theory. So, P.S., this is the single most important part of this lecture that I think you need to grasp. There have been studies across all regions of the world. The answer is more or less in the same ballpark. When rural people are poor and their incomes are $1 a day, US average $2, $3, there's no change in their lifestyles, there's no change in their consumption pattern. When you hit $4 a day average income, they start changing their consumption patterns. They start changing their lifestyle. They start consuming more meat, more vegetables, more fruits. By the time you hit $5, $6, $7 a day, it's improving. By the time you hit $10 a day of a rural person, their lifestyle is as good as a millionaire's lifestyle. They are able to descend across all industrial services. Even at banking, what type of insurance, what type of bank account do I want? What type of school do I want my child to go to? Okay, so when we say middle class, it does not mean to say it's somebody earning $30,000 a year. Middle class means you have changed your consumption pattern to consuming manufactured goods and services. That's what it means. And in Africa, it starts at $4 a day, which is less than $2,000 a year. That's the most important class of people in industrializing any economy. In the way they fully industrialized, that's how they did it. Was when your rural people are now earning $4 or $5 a day, that is your biggest manufacturing market. It's not people who are millionaires or those who are earning $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a month who change the nature of the economy. It's a mass number of people who are earning $2,000, $3,000 a month. If the majority of the people in rural areas, 60% now are even at $2,000 a month, they will consume manufactured goods and services every day. And when you take those industries to the village, they will be consuming locally produced goods and services. You see the difference? That's how you build the local industry and the local demand. So creating demand for your manufactured goods and services is getting the majority of your rural people to earn $1,500 a year, $4, $5. That's all it means. You and me are not going to change the nature of this economy through our consumption patterns. Because if you increase my income by another $1,000 a month, it won't change my consumption pattern. You got to pay up that. Okay, so it's the number of people whose consumption pattern is going to change because of economic development, which determines where your economy is going. Look how many more millionaires they're going to create. I hope I've made that point. And for professors in universities, that's where you should be looking at. And I've already hammered the point that every single university, you are liars when it comes to social capital. You are not focused. Your humanities and social programs are way out of date. Yes, I'm sorry to say it in front of you because I'm very disappointed. I mean, in my own university, I've been chair, Great Zimbabwe University. They've been winning, our law school is the best. We win mid-court competitions every year, and we beat everyone, even in Harvard. But right next door to them, in all of Masvingo province, Manicaland province, Matabeleland South province, which are near your university, 85 to 90% of all cases that are tried in this country are in the primary court. They are not in the higher courts. And I've attended those courts, PVC. I've attended them in Bikita, in Nyanga. I've attended 5 of them. It's mayhem. It's a mixture of all the laws in the world without any system, without any real understood procedure of what that law means substantially and procedurally how it is applied. Because we are refusing to start African law and how it is integrated in the foreign laws that we've made our primary law. So you can do whatever you want to do, the issues don't go away. You can go to the Master of the High Court to resolve inheritance issues only on paper. You go back home, they still want to kill you. I'm very disappointed with our university. But anyway, No, I don't. So what I'm telling you now, and I'm sorry, because 2 years ago, I think we were in Lusaka, and we had our kind of meeting there, the annual meeting was about 600 people, and they made a mistake of asking me to be a keynote speaker. So I then said to them, at my beginning, if I knew what I know now 40 years ago when I started my career, I would not have taught my students 90% of the things I taught. I would have taught them the 10% that I'm now telling you. At tea time, about 5 people walked towards me, and they were all my former students, and said, Professor, can we have 90% refund? So, the definition of poverty has changed if we're going to understand the definition of wealth. Poverty is at 3 levels. We overemphasize material poverty. Oh, I don't have this, I don't have that. But that poverty is caused by 2 simple things. If you produce what you don't depend on, and you depend on what you don't produce, you are on the highway to poverty. And that's what every African economy is doing. Consuming things we don't produce, and producing things we don't depend on. What you are doing is trying to correct that. Because now a lot of products that we were producing but not consuming, like traditional grains, our African chicken, all these things now we are trying to, is now trying to produce what we depend on and depending on what we produce. That's the lowest level of poverty though, the deeper level of poverty is intellectual poverty. And intellectual poverty is when you value other people's knowledge over yours, and you depend on other people's knowledge system more than your own. So there's nothing wrong with borrowing other people's knowledge. But borrow intelligently, not copying and pasting. Which photocopy ever was as good as original? When you copy and paste, it's not going to work. It's like taking software from Apple or your iPhone into the cheap one. Away, Samsung. So iPhone software would be the best in the world when it is in an iPhone. But when you put it in a Samsung, it cannot solve and it will be lost. It's irrelevant. You have to upgrade your own software. But in Africa, that's the difference with Asians. When the Asians went, the Japanese go and borrow, the Japanese learned the industrial chemistry from the Germans, the military science from the Americans. They go back to Japan, they teach it in Japanese language, and they tell people, we're only copying the technology, not the culture, because those people are barbarians. In fact, if you go, they will then go and teach foreign languages in institutions for teaching foreign languages. But if you translate properly, it was institutions of teaching barbaric languages. So, but ours, we send them overseas to learn engineers. They spend more time learning table manners. You don't drink wine in this glass, it has to be in that glass. Okay. And spiritual poverty is the biggest one. That is not believing in yourself. So, in terms of rural industrialization, these are the 3 forms of capital that you're trying to create. These are 3 forms of wealth that our colonial education system taught us backwards. Because when you're colonized by fully industrialized nations, when you are not fully industrialized, you emphasize economic capital. You think making money is more important than anything else. You decay your social capital. I explained it yesterday. Your families are crumbling, your community systems are crumbling, your legal and administrative systems are crumbling, are no longer relevant. And you destroy your environmental capital. You even allow other foreigners coming in. You destroy your own environmental capital. Our educational system is to correct this. Our educational system has to allow us to go back into these communities and upgrade the three forms of capital. Don't just say we're going there to get them to make money. Okay. So let's see the social innovation is also going. If you are sending, if you are upgrading the manufacturing aspect, also send your mobile teams on the legal aspects and the social aspects. Upgrade the whole thing in the environmental thing. That's what that's at a higher level of thinking. Now this one, I don't have time to really explain to you, but I only brought it up today because somebody was asking yesterday, what does it take for the land issue? This is when you invite me to your university, or when the peers sends me to your university, I'll explain all this, because the whole transformation process is from a predominantly rural agrarian society, that's the green, to a predominantly urban industrial society as you go that way. And that changes agricultural system, rural transformation, and urban industrial process. So what happens, your entire system happens here. And that is the thing that you were trying to get to yesterday, to say what the land issue has been mentioned several times, and it's something I'll talk to you in detail when we have time. But essentially, when you are still at the what you might call early stages, you're in a predominantly rural agrarian society. Land is territory. It's not property. It's your place of being. It belongs to your clan. It only becomes property when you transform into a middle income level. Then it becomes more property. And until you are fully industrialized, fully integrated economy, then it becomes capital. When land or any property becomes capital, it means you don't need to see it to convert it into money or currency. So your house in Borrowdale could be traded 3 times a day in Hong Kong, New York, and so on, because it's been encoded in the legal, economic, and other systems that your bank who gave you the mortgage just can trade it. You are not even aware of it. So when our land reform program kicked in, we're around here, middle income country. We took all that land back from the whites, which was necessary, but it took most of the land back to territory. Now we have to take it all the way back again. So it's something that we're going to have to deal with. But the massification agenda is what we are talking about mostly today. And we're basically saying, if you have a simple definition of industrialization, it's a massification at 3 levels. Massification of production, raw materials. That's why we say village township. Village township. Because if you go to China in 1980, they say you must manufacture within 25 kilometers. You can't be growing all this maize, aggregating it, then taking it 200 kilometers away to store it in a GMP depot, and then you mill it, send it back 200 kilometers, so that you can eat it. Then you eat salsa that has traveled 400 kilometers. So this has happened within a short distance. Okay. So the integration is as follows. Don't call it informal industries if you want Chinese model or Asian model. It's proto-industries. So when we say we're going into the rural areas and we're building those community hubs and we're giving them energy, power, we're integrating them digitally, etc., we're giving them new business models. We're upgrading mostly proto-industry into light industry. Light industry is what belongs mostly in rural areas. But in Zimbabwe, when you say light industry, you're talking of Harare, a corner of Harare where, no. Light industry must happen, Kumusha, that's the proper light industry, where a menial task, like plowing, kumbudza, winnowing, right? Those you upgrade from artisanal to small machines. That's light industry. Heavy industry comes because they are manufacturing means of manufacturing. They are manufacturing small machines Because now there are thousands upon thousands of machines for everything that you can think of. Now you've got an industrial society. So that is where I said it yesterday, the market is not God given. It comes through public. Yes, one of my favorite slides, because in the about 10 years ago, I was a very popular speaker of CZI, Confederation of Zimbabwe Industries, and the Zimbabwe Farmers Union. I think 3 years in a row I was asked to be keynote speaker until I started getting one. So, but I did one experiment after first round. I go to CZI, the 29 industry associations, and of those 14 industry associations are agro-based. First round. You see, and I want you as universities and institutions to realize these are your key industry associations, which are agro-based. Beverages, fruits, converge, grain, groceries, meat packers, national bakers, all the way. Okay. So on my second round, I asked the CZI, which agricultural producers associations are you working with? We said, do they have any? I said, yes, they have them. Ah, we don't know them. We don't even, who are those people? They didn't even know any. I do the same experiment. I go to the Farmers Union Annual Congress. I give the same presentation. I put this up. And I say, well, when you have enough gray hairs, you can do things that are not allowed to do. I say, oh, chairperson of commodities associations, please stand up. And they all stood up. Then I put this list and I said, you said you are which commodities association? It says, oh, oil seed producers association. I said, okay, sir, which of these industry associations are you working with? Oh, do they have industry associations? The farmers associations don't even know one industry association. You have to correct that both ways. All the farmer associations have to be associations because you are supplying manufacturing and industry, not because you are supplying barium seeker, sakupa, koba. Okay, that's what makes you an industry. So I always give this list for your higher and tertiary institutions as an example of where that industry is coming from and where it could be heading from. And never mind the non. So yes, yesterday I talked about talked about technological upgrading. Innovation is another definition that is not the university. Education 5.0. Yes, education 5.0. Until they gave me a warning, I just got a red card. I mean, no, that was the yellow one. It's pretty simple when you look at innovation. But universities, I think, or institutions, higher tertiary institutions, I'm challenging you to redefine your definition. A lot of what you have are good inventions. An invention is not necessarily an innovation. It's just a good, fantastic technological product. It only becomes an innovation when it becomes socially and economically successful. Then it's an innovation because now it's solving a new problem. An innovation means you're solving a problem. Okay. So what we're now beginning to see in yesterday's presentations and today are innovations. I must agree. Innovations must be at all the levels. I already mentioned technological, managerial, organizational, institutional, service delivery. We need innovations at all those levels. The two examples that I talked about earlier on, so you can be close to the end. The Chinese did it the tough way. The Chinese revolution was cultural revolution, they called it. They closed down the universities and colleges and said, all the teachers and lecturers, students go back to the village first. To really understand the society, they have to I don't think any other country has that confidence. There's no other nation who's capable of doing that kind of thing. I mean, so that's an option that cannot be applied anywhere else. But I always mentioned it just to tell you, the heritage-based education 5.0, if it was being done by the Chinese, they would have sent everyone back to the village, to the basics. The Japanese approach is probably more appropriate for us. I led the Japanese approach by accident, when I also gave a brilliant presentation somewhere and got a very good. And when a Japanese professor up to me and said, "Professor, that was good, but I think you are still missing the point." And I had to listen. He said, "You Africans, you just talk all this stuff. No, that's not the way to do it. Here's how the Japanese did it. Here's how we did it," he said. Second World War, we lost the war and realized, now we have to take over the world in another way. Militarily, we have been defeated. Let's take over some of these industries. United States way down as a global superpower. United States was the new global power. They decided as a nation in Japan, we will take over the motor industry. The Japanese formula is, if we decide we're going to take over this industry in the world, the first thing we do is either we set up a college or an institution or a project which says we are going to study everything known about the motor industry in the world so that we can make what they can make, we know how it's made. We don't do anything until we have studied everything that has to be known about that industry. They did it with the motor industry. Within 10, 15 years, they started producing motor vehicles, which everybody was laughing at. By the early 60s, I was old enough to see my father buy a Japanese car, and everybody was laughing at him. Oh, that businessman must be broke now, he's buying a Japanese car. Just like we're laughing at the Chinese, Xinjiang, remember? And then we stopped laughing. It was not funny anymore. The Japanese did that to everybody in the 50s, 60s. They tested blood with the motor industry. They said, now we're going to take over the electronics industry. They started everything that is known about electronics. They started building the best televisions, the best recorders, the best video. So, P.S. and Honorable Deputy Minister, I'm thinking the universities, if you decide this is the industry we're going into, this is what we are going to push, please study that industry thoroughly. You can have the best product in the world in your hands, and you can never make it in the industry because you didn't understand that industry. Because we haven't studied that industry sufficiently to know why we are going into it, where we are going to hit it, where we have the competitive advantage. So, I think on that note, I think I've exhausted my enthusiasm to. This is the whole thing. We got the okay. So you left my PowerPoint to be shared. Yeah. Thank you. So I'll hand over to people who really want you to do some group work. Let me just suggest that will be after tea time, is it?
Yes.
Shall we explain this after tea time?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, thanks. So let me. Thank you. And so on. So it's most just decide to leave the laws as they are and create a statutory instrument or whatever. Then when it comes to the issue of what Dr. Mabisa was saying about different perspectives and how we deal with them, I think that's part of the outputs of this program is to have community engaged scholarship happening, so that it's not just community engaged action, but the scholarship must be with it to address those different perspectives. And finally, what Dr. Ganda says, is quite important. I don't think most of what communities you showed us are communal systems. The Chinese had commune systems, so that was really not working. And I think we're starting on a better stage than the Chinese. Then there's no communal production, but what is attempted is aggregating, and then the common business aspect can come at manufacturing, aggregation, manufacturing, and so on. And I think universities' incentive systems, I think, are also on demand. Let's see how it goes. Yesterday, I said to my colleagues, and this is the last point I'm going to make, the most important thing that came from the press calls yesterday is, let's start. But commit to learn. If you say we start with what you have, then at the same time, must commit to be a learning society. Let's learn from what we're doing. We self-start, we self-assess, and we self-correct all the time. So if we commit to increasing our learning capabilities as we go, we're going to win. Thank you.